I didn't know what we were stepping into when we announced that, and I don't know. I don't necessarily know if Mike knew what he was stepping into when this was released as well. So a lot of people know side scrollers because we did this interview with DarkSydePhil March of last year. I think we're approaching like I don't know 10 months or so, right? And we moved on from it. Like we had some fun with it for a little bit. We kind of like really at the end of the day, we don't really understand why Phil's mad at us. Like he got really pissed at us because we talked about the show. And I really think that the idea is that he's not necessarily mad at us. He's mad at Adam more than anything else. I think that's really what it is. Adam's on the show once a week now. He's on Wednesdays. So, but Adam has like moved on. He doesn't really care. For him, it was like a day and he was just exposed to this crazy world of DarkSydePhil and stuff. Anyways, we did this interview, and for a lot of people, it was like a really big thing for them, right? Because they follow Phil's career and stuff. And I've reached out to Phil a couple times, and I like when Street Fighter 6 was coming out, I was like, we should play Street Fighter 6, and he never responded. And he's kind of gone out of his way to be like, he doesn't really want anything to do with us. Even after like finishing the interview, he thought it like went really well, but I think he just really took offense to Adam being honest about his feelings about him, right? So anyways, it's been a really interesting, like I said, we moved on like a long time ago, but I get DMs and stuff from people or messages on Discord who were like, Phil's really trashing side scrollers. And it's like, okay, like, what do you want me to do about it? I don't care. There's
been almost a year.
Right. Let's all just kind of like, like I said, we're long past that. We've grown long past the idea of worrying about Phil on a day-to-day basis. But there was some interesting news that I knew about. I didn't know if I could talk about, but I guess the word got out about the DarkSydePhil documentary, which was being produced by Mike Klum, who he's been on the show. He was on the show when the Boogie 29922, no, whatever, the Boogie documentary came out, and that documentary has been blowing up. And when in my private conversations with Mike, I was like, look, you got to do one on Phil. You got to do one. And he didn't really understand when we were first talking about it, but he did some digging like he should do, did a little research, and reached out to Phil. And apparently they had agreed to do a documentary about DarkSydePhil. And I think like that's great. I was like, man, that's going to be huge for your channel. People will love to see that. So many people do like, they do documentaries about Phil, but they don't actually get Phil. And that was the big thing about this was he had been to Phil's house. He had met his wife. He had done all these things, which were previously thought of as like, wow, that's crazy. So with that said, the documentary had been teased and announced and all this stuff. And apparently over the weekend, DarkSydePhil went out of the way to cancel the documentary. And I have a clip of from his stream where he's talking about it. And we'll just watch this real quick. This is from Poem's Future here. So you can check this out.
My wife has finally made the decision to come back into my content. And Kat now has been here on 2 streams, which have been awesome. And now we're trying to plan out the content where she can do co-op gameplay and commentary with me. And that's a lot of work, too, to figure that all out, right? So it's kind of like we got all this stuff going on already. And now it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, now we got a plan to have all this time away from work so I could film and I can do this and I got to travel to do this and that. And then on top of all of that, just so you guys know, there is one other factor that just happened this week. And I'm not going to tell you guys about it right now. Maybe eventually I would bring it up, but I'm not going to right now. But there was another huge determining factor that just happened. And that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. And I was like, I just can't do this. All right? So, just to make this official, all right, it is canceled. It's not, oh, it's delayed or whatever. The documentary is canceled, all right? Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do something like this again or consider doing it again in the future. I'm saying right now, this is not the time, the climate, or the level of stress to really be taking on a project like this.
So there you go.
That's so, like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, it's not delayed, it's canceled. However, I may think about doing it in the future.
Right.
So it's not really canceled then.
Well, but I think this is very on brand for Phil, right? In my interactions with him, in that, yes, you have a lot going on, but the documentary that was previously released did wonders for Boogie's exposure, right? And did wonders for his career. It made him relevant for a small window of time where the documentary popped off. And if Phil was to take the time and make this a priority, I mean, what are we realistically talking here? Maybe 10 hours of filming, 15 hours of filming, right? 15 hours of your life, to devote to this. That from a strictly time to like a risk reward aspect of it, there's way more to gain from this than there is anything else. But obviously, I was approached to be a part of it. I was going to be interviewed for it and such, and I don't really know how much I would have contributed to it. But I reached out to Mike after hearing this, and was like, "Hey, man, sorry to hear about the doc." And he put out an official statement. He texted me last night, and I just want to read this off because I think it's people are like, what's going on? How come? What happened? Did Phil cancel it? Did Mike cancel it? What happened? So Mike sent over this. He said, working with Phil was a professional and straightforward process. As we got into pre-production, things ended up not aligning for the time commitment it was going to be. This happens, and the project wrapped up on good terms, and I'll be moving on to other films. There will be no DSP documentary for now, but I remain interested in documenting Phil in the future. So pretty straightforward, and it sounds very similar to like what Phil said. I think that they both stand to gain a lot from working with each other, and it makes sense for them to do it. And I think they're both open to it. But whatever that last thing is that Phil was mentioning, apparently it was a deal breaker for the whole thing. So I don't know. I would love to see it. Obviously, I think a lot of people would be very interested in it, and I think there's a lot of people who are probably in this chat right now who would be very interested in watching it. There's people who make DSP watching like their sport on a day-to-day basis, and it's really interesting, community of fans and detractors, and the push and pull attached to that, which is why the interview that we did, in March of last year was so big, and I didn't know what we were stepping into when we announced that, and I don't necessarily know if Mike knew what he was stepping into when this was released as well. So I think there's a little bit of similarities attached to it. So yeah, I mean, I hope it makes it. I hope it happens. I hope we can be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. You got anything, Blabs?
No, I just think, like you said, I think it's a bit silly of him to cancel it. If anything, it would have been a huge benefit for him. So, oh well, it's his decision, his life, but I think that was pretty foolish.
Yeah. Well, who knows? That would probably wouldn't be the first decision you'd make that some people consider foolish, and
Sure.
but with everybody, people look at us and like, you idiots.